a registered sex offender who made a fortune as a hedge fund manager in the 1980s and 90s, known for his lavish lifestyle and high-profile connections. Jeffrey Epstein is facing new allegations that he exploited dozens of young girls for sex.
You've seen Ghislaine Maxwell up close and personal. What sort of personality was exposed to you? What did you see in her?
She was very effervescent and bubbly at first when you would meet her. She was lovely, she had a great vocabulary. She was one of those people who could talk to anyone and make them laugh, but she was also very silly and immature, like she was a teenager kind of humor. And it wasn't really that funny, but because she was so charming and well-dressed and well-spoken, she could kind of get away with saying weird things because it would take a minute to recognize, is that what she said? So she had a way of, she liked to disarm people, make them feel a little bit unsteady. And Jeffrey was the same way.
Did you see a more sinister side to her?
Yes. She would go like shopping, for part of the day and go all down Madison Avenue and come back with all these bags and be in the best mood because she'd bought all these things, or she'd go rollerblading and then be in a great mood. And then she would turn like that. And like as school's getting out, she's like, I've got to get the nubiles. I'm going to get the nubiles. And it was just like a switch in her personality. It was very strange, very strange.
When you repeat what she had said, that she has to get the nubiles, what did she mean by that?
Okay, so when I asked her what she meant by that, she said she needed models for Victoria's Secret. And she said she needed models for like the Limited Corporation is what Epstein called it. So she said it wasn't just for Victoria's Secret, but it was mostly for them. And because one time I asked, like, why are they so young? And she said the Limited Corporation has a lot of companies and these girls model, okay, Maria? And they start young. And I thought it was really strange because I did see a couple girls in braces and I've never seen a model with braces. And then all of them were completely flat-chested and sometimes they'd be wearing a uniform, being marched upstairs. And one day a girl came down crying and I asked Ghislaine, why is she crying? And she said she didn't get the job. She needs to toughen up. She needs to learn how to toughen up. The modeling world's tough. So, who was I to question? I was just the slave at the door, But after a while, I just felt uncomfortable, no matter who they were bringing in. I said, I don't feel comfortable. This is weird. It's a very strange thing.
Were you ever present when Ghislaine Maxwell recruited girls for Jeffrey Epstein?
Yes, absolutely. So several times, I was in the car with her. I didn't know what she was doing, of course. I thought she was getting models because that's what she said. And so she would ask the driver to stop the car. And then he would just stop it immediately. And she'd dash across to the school or the park or wherever she was going. And she would write down her phone number for a child, a young girl. And then she'd get their phone number. And then I'd see that child at the house. And she'd say they're auditioning. I found a model in the park. And I've never been in the modeling world. So I just thought that was the strangest thing. But I also thought, well, maybe these children are being discovered. People get discovered. Very odd. So for 18 years, I've been in hiding, and I've continued to receive threatening phone calls from Ghislaine Maxwell.
How recently have you been threatened by Ghislaine Maxwell?
It's been about 5 years now, was my last time. But the problem is, when you've been emotionally terrorized like that, and with all the promises and the different ways she promised me I would die, I can't even go outside peacefully. I had Ghislaine promising me multiple ways that the people were going to be killing me.
Do you believe that Ghislaine Maxwell has the capability, the power to do that? To actually hire people
Absolutely.
To kill you?
Yes, she's very well connected. She made sure of it, that we all knew it. So I believe her. I believe her. And that's why I think I'm still alive.
What sort of threats has she made against you?
So originally it started with things like, I'm gonna burn your art, and then I'm gonna burn your career, and then I'm gonna burn you and the house you live in. And then it was like, well, you better be careful while you're jogging because there's so many ways to die there. And then it was, oh, be careful crossing a street. You can get shot in the back of the head because that's how Mossad shoots you. Just a lot of veiled threats, but they were threats against my life. And I told the FBI this, and I asked for witness protection, and I never received it. And I'm asking that they do their job so that we're not tormented forever. But instead, the people who rape children go to prison. That's where they need to be.
Epstein said this to me one time, but one day he pulled me aside and he said, Maria, look at this. You see all this? And I'm like, what? And he said, this room, all these decorators coming and going and all this stuff all this artwork and this beautiful furniture. You see it all? I said, yeah. And he said, I got it for $1. And this is the first time I heard the name Les Wexner. He said, Wexner gave it all to me. He'll do anything for me. When I called the FBI, I'm going to tell you what I told them. I said, I know this is strange, but I said, I have a report to make on someone that I've been working for that recently kidnapped me. And they said, who are you talking about? And I said, okay, well, his name is Jeffrey Epstein. And I said, and her name is Ghislaine Maxwell. And I said, but here's what's important. It also involves the Clinton family. It involves Bill Clinton for sure. It involves Donald Trump. And I said that the most important one, and I said this, that he's the head of the snake, is Les Wexner. And they said, what do you think he is? And I said, he's Jewish mafia. He's not Italian. He's Jewish, and he's mafia. I said, I can't be any clearer with you. And they said, how do you know he's Jewish mafia? And then I went on to list everything that I've seen. It was just so creepy.
Could you
and how
tell me
what
you told them about why you thought Wexner was the Jewish mob? Because that anything you can tell me there helps me build the case. I don't know if you read my background on Wexner, part 3 of my series, or remember it, but there's definitely a lot of evidence pointing to him. Right. So there was this police report filed, and I think it was Columbus, about the murder of his tax attorney, and the police report was destroyed, but there was a copy of it that ended up resurfacing 15 years later after it was supposed to be destroyed, that linked him pretty much directly to the National Crime Syndicate, which is the Jewish and Italian mafias working together. But in the 1980s, there were these series of lawsuits and arrests made. Rudy Giuliani was actually a big part in that. It was like the pizza something, I can't remember, but they basically, the Jewish mob in New York took out the Italian mafia they'd been working with all those years and consolidated and basically just took over the whole thing. So anyway, Wexner has ties to those guys. So, but anything you can give me about what you saw that made you think, so I mean, there's clear ties from that, right? But beyond that, anything you can tell me about what you saw, why you thought it was organized crime and not like intelligence, things like that. So anything there is helpful. Right. So one of the things that made me think it was all the passports. I know for a fact Epstein had an Israeli passport because he showed me, But Epstein, and I'll tell you about the Wexner, like why I think he's mafia, but I just want to say too why I thought it was really sketchy that they had, like, how Ghislaine had all those passports. He had a passport, a French passport, an English passport, an Israeli passport, an American passport, and there was one other. And then it made me really mad that when the FBI raided the safe, I know what was in that safe. And it's not a regular safe, it's a whole room, just so you know. So when people say a safe, they think, oh, it's the safe. It's Wexner had one too. It's a whole room you walk into. And in that safe, he had a lot of photographs of children, and I know for about pictures of my sisters are in there, because one of the people from his freaking office had told me they were in his briefcase, and he kept his briefcase in that safe. He also kept everything in there, because he told me he kept it for Wexner, everything. And when I asked why they recorded everything all the time, I said, is Wexner really paranoid? And he said, Epstein said, that's one way of saying it. He keeps everything. He records it all. He said, I record everything, and I keep it for Wexner in the safe. So the first house I go to has pinhole cameras. Jeffrey's showing me. He's really proud of them. Second house I go to has pinhole cameras. He says, Wexner gave me this house for $1. Wexner gave me this for $1. Then I go to the apartment. They had pinhole cameras in the Victoria's Secret dressing room. And just to fast forward, when I was in Wexner's house, there were cameras there were pinhole cameras throughout that thing. And Jeffrey again is like, oh, look at all the pinhole cameras. And Ghislaine says, you need to be careful. We can see everything. When I would go to the restroom or take a shower or anything, Ghislaine would call me, and from the speaker, and this is in New York, sometimes in London, in different places, she would say, get out of the loo, get off the toilet. She would start screaming at me. And I was on the toilet. And I'm like, what's happening? So then later Jeffrey's like, oh yeah, everything's being said to Abigail. They're watching everything. They literally watched my every move, Whitney. Who does that? My point is, who has cameras everywhere? Sharpshooters, Doberman, mafia. That's why I said mafia. I'm like, I don't know anyone who lives like this. There were little pinhole cameras in that first mansion that Annie met Jeffrey in, and in the second mansion that he gave Jeffrey for $1. They were in the building that his brother owned on 66th Street. There were pinhole cameras in all these buildings that Wexner, all the buildings that Wexner had owned. Well, here's where they were in the building that Wexner owned. They were in the Victoria's Secret stalls. Even though I had this driver's license, and Jeffrey had given me his SUV to use while I was there, but I couldn't go outside because, Whitney, there were sharpshooters, and no one discusses it. Actual freaking sharpshooters everywhere. And anyway, the weirdest part about being at Wexner's was it wasn't the basement, because they had a basement. It was like below that, and there was a sauna in that room, like a huge sauna, and then they had like a vault, and then they had a door to an underground tunnel. And the only way I knew it was an underground tunnel was because their maid told me. I said, what is this door? Because I used to keep everything down there. And she said, oh, that's the tunnel that leads to the main house. I'm like, well, that's weird. Why would they do that? And she said, oh, you don't know? And I said, no. And she said, there's a giant 10,000 square foot floor that raises up when someone goes through that tunnel. And then they can enter the room secretly, go in, and then no one ever sees them. The floor raises up. She said, it's 10,000 square feet. I mean, here's the thing. I lived there for 3 months, and I never once saw him. I saw Abigail on her horses. You go out to get her horses. I could just see her and go out, but I never once saw him. And that's why I called him like the Wizard of Oz, because he was controlling everything, but no one ever saw the guy. Okay, so Wexner set up, just so you know, nobody talks about this, but Whitney, before that first house, the house that Wexner gave to Jeffrey for $1, it's like the mansion that he raped all the children in. Before that house, there was another one. Yes, Wexner gave him that one, and that thing was incredible. That's where Annie actually met him. I brought her over there. But that mansion then was later given to Ghislaine recently. She sold it to give it to, or the townhouse, whatever, and that's how she settled with Virginia. She sold that. Oh my God, that woman. And she also had an apartment she took me to. So then she shows me all this stuff on the mantle. She takes me to the mantle. I'd never been in this apartment. It's on the Upper East Side. It was like probably 3,000 square feet. Really nice apartment. Like, I didn't have any friends that lived that well, but it wasn't like, showy like her other places. But she shows me on the mantle, and I'm like, oh, what's this? And she said, these are things my father took from the British Museum. And she's like, they're ancient relics. And I'm like, did she just say that? I could never repeat things to people.
like I was lying or something. And I'm like, what do you mean he took them? And she's like, he took them, he likes them. And she's like, this is an ancient Peruvian relic, you know, and she's showing me this stuff that was 22 karat gold that had been taken from graves, but out of the British Museum. I'm like, this is not good. And then she showed me all the royals. Like she had about like 12 photo albums of growing up with the royals. Everyone thinks that they met at Oxford. No, they did not.
Yeah, I'm lying about that. Yeah.
She showed me pictures.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I did an article where I brought up some scrubbed news reports talking about Ghislaine and Andrew way before they said they officially met. And I also heard from someone that Epstein was in London a lot in the 80s and that he had met Prince Andrew at some point during his time in London in the 80s. And he was apparently dating Ghislaine in the 80s. Even though they claim they met in the early 90s and all this stuff. So I know they're all lying. So trying to figure out how much they knew. I mean, any of that information is really helpful. So.
Right. And she grew up with the royals. Like she showed me all the photo albums. Well, she also knew Fergie like a long, long time ago because I saw pictures of her super young with Fergie before she was ever married to Prince Andrew. And I mean, it was weird. It's like somehow she knew a lot of these people. Now she knew Prince Andrew when they were definitely like, I mean, she looked to be maybe 20 in some of these pictures, or maybe younger than that even with Prince Andrew. And so I can date some of it by telling you that some of the photographs where they're all super young, they were making fun. I'm not kidding you. The pictures of Diana when she was just dating the prince, and Diana's in the corner crying in some of these pictures, and Ghislaine's like, look there, we made her cry. Isn't that funny? We hated Diana. That's what she said. And I was like, oh my God, that's horrible.
I just don't think I have as many supporters in that environment than I did. Yeah.
You mean within the royal household?
They see me as a threat of some kind.
Ghislaine answers to Wexner. I know that for a fact.
So you think she answers more to,
that's how I knew he was
Wexner than like, I don't know, like Israeli intelligence where her dad worked, right? Do you think she's more like under Wexner than...
Right. No, I know she's Israeli. Yeah, well, Wexner is Israeli intelligence, 100%. And I believe that, I mean, in a way it was just a sign that she would be under him. And I know that's where she got all of her funding to do this scam with Epstein. I know that. Well, the thing that's so gross is that the FBI is complicit. You're the only one who cares about how it all began. That's what's so important.
That's where it is. I mean, that's where the real story is. I mean, that's how you find out how extensive it is.
That's the story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's all out of Israel. I'm going to tell you what Ghislaine told me about her dad. Because, I knew her right after he died. Like, I think he'd only died like 2 years before.
He died in 91.
She was constantly grieving for him, right? She was constantly still in grief. And Epstein, okay, so she would tell the story that her dad had Epstein protecting her. And I'm like, wait, what? This is weird. So she would say that Epstein was kind of assigned to her to take care of her because her dad, like right before her dad passed away.
He and Epstein were involved in laundering about 1.5 billion, I think it is. And Hoffenberg ended up in upstate New York in a federal prison. He was there at the time that Epstein was in Florida being charged. So Ghislaine Maxwell had she was the glue. She was
Although
the
Epstein was with Les Wexner at the time, right?
Yes, he was. He was with people called the mega group. I mean, these group of big sort of businessmen who are linked to Israel. Some would say they're sort of the rich Zionists in America. But I think that, as I believe, Epstein more than likely was connected to Mossad. She was too. And I think that she would have been used as the bait. My personal feeling, I think that she helped Epstein move in that kind of direction. In other words, where he wasn't just sort of the money guy, kind of crooked money guy. He was a money guy who could actually help Israel.
But her dad knew him.
Right.
I thought that was really strange.
The guy that used to work for Israeli intelligence with Robert Maxwell told me that he had seen Jeffrey Epstein in Maxwell's office in like the mid-'80s. So that definitely goes back several years.
Part of the business too? Was she involved in what you were doing over there?
No. Later on, she got involved with Israeli intelligence together with him.
Right.
But not in the science deal, in Iran or in business.
Would you say she was an agent as well? Was she someone working for Israeli intelligence?
Oh, definitely.
Military intelligence as well?
Yes. These guys were seen as agents. And so they found a niche for themselves, blackmailing American and other political figures.
For the Israelis?
So they set up an operation outside Monica's apartment, and they bugged it. And they picked up some 30 hours of phone sex between the president and Mr. Lewinsky.
30 hours?
About 30 hours, yeah. And those are all taken back to Tel Aviv. Mossad probably remains still top of the pile because it's never lost its war-footing mentality. Mossad also has, in a sense, an easier role to play in a way because it says first, last, and always Israel, always. And anything that only affects Israel is what interested primarily.
See, sleeping around is not a crime. It's maybe embarrassing, but not a crime. But sleeping with underage girls is a crime.
I did receive money to go to these parties. After every party, I was paid by Mr. Epstein. There wasn't, out of all the girls that were there with me, most of them were 13, 14. I think the oldest one might have been 16, just turned 16. And she'd been there for a while. He'd see me, he would say, oh man, you look, and it wasn't like oh, you remind me of my daughter. It was this sick, evil, like, you remind me of my daughter. It was just this weird pleasure, sick smile. Like, I don't even want to know what he was thinking about. I can imagine what he was thinking about. After the parties would end, We were to report to Mr. Epstein and basically tell him everything that happened, with who, what they liked, what they disliked, if there was any requests, if there was any talk about anything. That's what we told Mr. Epstein everything. He ripped off all my clothes and he started to basically have sex with me, and I was screaming because I'd never had sex before. It was my first time, and Tiffany was yelling at him too. She was saying that I was a virgin, and he told us to just shut the fuck up and just basically took my virginity while I was crying and telling him to stop, and that's basically begging for him to just stop. But he comes over mad because I was crying, and he said I should be thankful that someone like Donald Trump took my virginity. Or he basically didn't say took my virginity. He said I should be glad that someone like Donald Trump popped my cherry and not some pimply little 14-year-old. And I just was like, what if I said, what if I get pregnant? I'm not even talking to him. I didn't want to talk to him. I was talking to Tiffany. And he said, well, you get an abortion then, bitch, and then just walked away.
I'm sure these girls are underage. I have theories about who wanted him dead. Probably there were quite a number of people in the States wanted him dead, but I would think mainly the Israelis.
Mainly? I mean, look at this. They have the most to lose with all of this coming out.
Because you really didn't want the stories to come out about how they were blackmailing American politicians.
Yes, it's true, because Elaine's thing that she told me was that he was assigned to her to protect her because her dad had died. And I'm like, who assigned you? You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean? And when she was showing me pictures of her dad and crying over them, I had to sit with this bitch all the time to go through photo albums and I know her really well. And I know how she operates. And that's why I'm so afraid that she's still on the loose. And I know who's taking care of her. I know it is the Rothschild. I know it is. And I'll tell you how I know. Because Lady Rothschild is ready to kill me because she's best friends with she's gonna sue.
Is this who you're talking about?
Lynn, yeah, Lynn Forster. She's calling me a liar because she's saying that she set Dershowitz. I saw Dershowitz coming in and out of the house.
Yeah, she introduced Epstein.
She's saying it's not possible.
She claims that anyway.
She did. Yeah, she did not. She did not. But she wants to think so. So their story is that she introduced them as a gift from Wexner, because every year Wexner would give a gift to Epstein, and this year it was, he's such a wonderful gift, Dershowitz.
Look, I was introduced to him by the Lady Rothschild.
So she gave him as a gift, But anyway, she said to me, he was assigned to me to protect me because my dad died. And I was like, I don't understand this. And I said, well, what happened to your dad? She said, those cunts pushed him. And I thought she said off the baby Ghislaine. So for years I thought it was the lady Ghislaine. She said those cunts pushed him off the baby Ghislaine.
People who knew him at the time, who worked with him, have said to me, Robert Maxwell thought he actually owned the Mossad, like he owned newspapers and everything else, that he bought them with his millions of stolen money he was feeding to them and so on, with these incredible deals he was making with these people he was bringing them to and so on. That didn't work with the Mossad. They thought he'd become, what we call a loose cannon.
Yeah, no, it was through Ghislaine. I mean, it was Evelyn Forrester, I believe. Didn't she hook up through them?
She met Evelyn Rothschild, who's her husband, through Henry Kissinger, I believe, a builder.
Yes. Oh, through Kissinger. Okay. Yeah, of course.
Clinton has a very warm friendship with none other than Lynn Forster de Rothschild. You know Lynn, of the infamous Rothschild banking family. She was introduced to her Rothschild husband by none other than Henry Kissinger at none other than the 1998 Bilderberg Group Conference. For real, that is how Lynn became a member of the Rothschild family, a family who's been under scrutiny for centuries for using their banking wealth to control the outcomes of wars and massive global shifts in power. You don't get more establishy than Lynn Rothschild.
The other thing about Wexner is, I'm sure you know this, but this is something I noticed when Jim and I drove through, Ohio. As soon as you cross into Ohio from Kentucky or wherever, you get the first building you see is the Abigail Wexner Center for Women. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And then their buildings dot the whole state. So no matter where you are, you see Wexner this, Wexner that. But then when you go to the bathroom, especially as you get close to Columbus, there's human trafficking signs everywhere, Whitney, everywhere. So when you go to the bathroom in Columbus, on the door it says, do not speak to anyone, do not walk with anyone, go back to your car. I mean, there's instructions on how to not be trafficked.
Reports of human trafficking in Ohio are on the rise, according to a new report at the Polaris Project, which works to prevent human trafficking.
It's happening all over the country. The state of Ohio, in fact, ranks 4th in the nation.
Right here in the Buckeye State lies an underworld burning with sex and prostitution.
Ohio, actually, in the United States, ranks as high as 4th in terms of the most prevalent use of sexually trafficked people.
In Ohio, we see the average age of entry into sex trafficking to be about 15 years old.
And I'm sorry, I don't believe in coincidences at all. I don't believe in them. And years ago, when I was in hiding, I was listening to the show and it said, did you know that all human trafficking begins and ends in Columbus, Ohio? Isn't that interesting? And I'm like, what?
I had no idea. In Columbus, Ohio.
What? So human trafficking from the United States, even if they get the kids from Phoenix before they take them to Mexico, they go to Columbus. What are the chances? I mean, he owns Columbus, and it's the hub. Now, it's not the number one, LA is the number 1 center for human trafficking now, but at the time it was Columbus, and it's still Columbus is number 3. It's not the 3rd biggest city, and it's also the place where they all go. They all go to there before they leave the country or go to wherever they're going. They go to Columbus first. Why? Why do they take everyone to Columbus first? And who has a tunnel under their house and the floor raises up? I think Jeffrey just did his bidding for Wexner in whatever way he wanted. I think Jeffrey did whatever Wexner wanted. And he provided Wexner not only with boys but with girls.
Really quick, you sort of mentioned that you knew that Wexner had some sort of Israel tie and that Elaine was working under him. Can you elaborate on that? Do you think he had ties to Israeli intelligence?
Yeah.
Okay, and why do you think that?
So absolutely do. So, okay, so this is why I think it. So Jeffrey and Ghislaine, they were at the estate. They came 3 times to visit Wexner while I was there. And they would go meet with him, then they'd come back. And Ghislaine said they were working on all these Israeli charities.
Leadership is the most precious commodity.
I established the Wexner Heritage Foundation because I thought it was terribly important that the lay leaders of the Jewish community be intelligent, educated, informed.
Going to Israel was the highlight of the entire Wexner experience.
The key to the future of the Jewish people lies in the creative and thoughtful and respectful interchange between Israel and Jews in the diaspora.
For students and for Jewish people. And I remember thinking, oh, that's weird. And she was like, you don't understand our loyalty to Israel, Maria. You don't understand our loyalty. She's like, unless you're a dual citizen, you just don't get it. She's like, your people could never understand. She would say, my people, your people, the chosen one, all that bullshit. But it's just unfortunate that all the Jewish people I met also happen to be pedophiles that run the world economy, you know? So it gives you like a bad taste in your mouth. Like, they get a number on all of us. We've all had a hard time with, like, a lot of it because of the abuse, you know? So it's hard to not then go, all these people are like this, when it's not true. Not all of them. Just a huge chunk of elites are like this. I guess all of the elites. I don't know. This is how the elites speak to their, quote, servants. I lost 20 pounds. I was very small anyway, but I lost 20 pounds because I wasn't allowed to go get food. And when I called Ghislaine and asked why I couldn't eat there, she said, it's a Jewish country club. You're not Jewish. They're not going to serve you. This is how this woman spoke to me. Yeah, this is how these people think, Whitney. They, honest to God, think their DNA is better than everybody else's. I swear to you. It was a theme all the time with them. With Eileen Guggenheim, with Jeffrey Epstein, with Ghislaine. It was a theme. Jeffrey was a lot less horrible than she was as far as a human being, like just being around, because she was raping just as many children.
So the country club, you weren't allowed to go because it was only for people of a certain religion and ethnicity. Okay, so that's unfortunate.
I mean, they could cut you down, and it was so morally devastating. Like, you just felt useless as a human being when you were told you're nothing because you're not Jewish, you're stupid, you're useless, a useless white girl, a poor little peasant. Just the things I was told, I was just like, I believed it, because it was like a cult. The problem. Yeah, you wouldn't believe the way Jeffrey and Ghislaine spoke about African Americans. It was like, it made my skin crawl. Anybody who was not Jewish, and sorry about this, but the way they spoke about them, it was really horrifying, and it showed me a great deal about how these people truly believe that they're chosen to do something here. I don't know, it's unbelievable to me. I mean, and it was every one of them, the way they spoke. And one time I heard Isabel say to her mother, Eileen, Mommy, why do you call Maria a nobody? And she said, honey, Isabel, Maria is not a Jew. She is a nobody.
Maria openly talks about how only Jews are human and the rest of human beings are like cattle, basically.
Well, Ghislaine did make it very clear to me that Annie was very lucky to be able to carry a Jewish baby. That was another thing. I told every news network, and they go, oh, we can't talk about that.
Let me be very frank with you, Amy. We have to say the truth. The Israeli lobby, the Jewish lobby, are by far too strong and too aggressive. It's not good for the Jewish community, it's not good for Israel. But the Israeli propaganda and the Jewish propaganda in recent years made it as a systematic method. Whenever anybody dares to raise questions or to criticize Israel, he is immediately and automatically labeled as anti-Semite, and then he has to shut his mouth, because after this, what can he say? Yes, it is legitimate to criticize Israel. Yes, it is legitimate to raise questions, and this does not mean that we are anti-Semites. We are not ready to play this game anymore, in which they shut our mouths with those accusations, which in most of the cases are hollow. Well, I saw the other day a congressman say that nobody should question the relations between the United States and Israel. Excuse me? Nobody should question the relations between Israel and the United States? Here from Tel Aviv, I claim that those relationships are corrupted and are bad for peace and bad for Israel for the long run, because the United States let Israel go crazy, continue the occupation, do whatever it wants, and get this automatic and blind support.
This maybe you don't want to hear, I don't know. And I certainly don't want to hurt you on your show. You have one of the best. You're fair. But I believe that Israel has a powerful stranglehold on the American government. They control both members of the House and the Senate. They have us involved in wars in which we have little or no interest. Our children are coming back in body bags. Our nation is bankrupt over these wars. And if you open your mouth, you get targeted. And if they don't beat you at the poll, they'll put you in prison.
Of course, you can't talk about the truth, right? You can, but most people just won't. And I think it's a huge part of it, because this is the problem. This elitism is very deep. And these are the people pushing racism. But I know a lot of Jewish supremacists, they're all elite. And they're all connected, and they're one big group, and they are the biggest supremacists I've ever met.
I'm there to put terror on people in Palestine. I'm there to police every minute of their life. I'm there to take their life and control it, to go into their houses in the middle of the night, to arrest them, children, adults, women, young men, take their life sometimes, responding to protest, to any resistance, to us. We have very, very hard violence with rubber bullets, with of course not rubber, but real bullets, just covered with a little bit of rubber, or tear gas canister, or sometimes live ammunition that will take the life of one of the kids in Hebron at the time that I'm there. I'm later, after his life was taken, as order to make sure that nobody from his family getting out of the home to the funeral, make sure that everybody's under curfew, because the Israeli army is afraid of revenge of the family and the relative. So I'm there making sure the family does not leave the house. And as the father come out to understand what's going on, we arrest him. And when the mother of the child that our unit killed just the night before that, coming out and start screaming at us in Arabic, in words that I didn't understand at the time, I could understand every word she was saying, because her screaming was exactly like the screaming of my grandma when I was growing up and she was dreaming on Auschwitz.
So I was ready to throw a brick at her head and kill her. In my opinion, all the leftists are Israel haters. Those people have no place in our country, both the Arabs and the leftists. Ron, as someone who grew up in Israel, is this type of sentiment more common than not?
Yes, of course. The Israeli society is very much in a national identity, is very much a fascist identity, but we need to ask ourselves the real questions, like why is that? Why is nobody talking about what is the interest to stuff like taking more land from Palestinians, or grabbing more settlements, expanding the settlements, or attacking Gaza like the last offensive, the last massacre? The beneficiary of this situation are not the Israeli public, it's not the kids in the school, it's not the fascism in the street. The people that really, really get something out of it is the people that run the country. Not only Israel, also here in the US and people in Europe.
I was like, I can't, and they make it very clear, that I was a servant because I was white. I was a white servant.
כל הגויים שאתה רואה שיש בעולם המיליארדים האלה, הם הכל רק בשביל שהיהודים יהיה להם את התועלת. לא יודעים בדיוק.
אז אוטומטי עדיין, הם עוד לא משרתים אותנו לגמרי, רק שתגיד.
כל אחד יבוא, אז כל אחד יהיה לו... בינתיים, המשיח לא כאן, אז איך הם משרתים אותנו?
הם בונים לנו רבים, עוד בניינים, אבל יש גם יודעים שעושים לכם.
Yeah, it was made very clear to me. no, you're just a servant. You're white. Just like, let me tell you something. If I walk out of here not, at all racist, it's a freaking miracle because I'm still, I struggle every day with it. I'm like, oh, I was so abused. It's just, and the other thing that pisses me off is this whole anti-Semitic BS because they said it's called Bernie Sanders anti-Semitic. You know what I mean? Like, when is it going to end?
Sanders is an anti-Semite. I think he tolerates anti-Semitism. It's done over the years.
I've interviewed Bernie Sanders many times. I've never heard him make an anti-Semitic comment. And then, Alan, he's Jewish.
So is Norman Finkelstein, so is Noam Chomsky, so is Gilad Atzmon. Some of the worst people in terms of not promoting Jewish values are Jews. That's no excuse.
Sheldon Adelson, he's on video saying all I care about is being a good citizen of Israel, and he's the top political donor in the United States.
I am not Israeli. The uniform that I wore in the military, unfortunately, was not an Israeli uniform. It was an American uniform. All we care about is being good Zionists, being good citizens of Israel.
She said about her dad's funeral, too. She told me, she said he was such an important person for Israel that they gave him a state funeral, and she went on and on and on about this funeral ceremony, and she showed me pictures of, like, what a big deal it was. And she said, they murdered him. That Israel murdered him. She said the CUNPs murdered him. And she's telling me about this. So, like, she's saying Israel murdered their assets.
They do that.
I don't know. That's what she believes. And, yeah.
Now, why do you say that Ghislaine would have been involved with Mossad, considering what happened to her father?
Well, people said she was one of the Maxwells who felt that her father was murdered, but they all suspected that it was a case of murder.
I thought after talking to Chef Andy that he jumped off the boat because Chef Andy was like, Maria, that guy was the biggest criminal in history in London, and he had stolen so much money that I think he jumped.
And this memorial in Jerusalem proves it.
Lonely, burdened by debts, and facing exposure as a fraudulent bankrupt, Robert Maxwell retreated during his last days into memories of his childhood and origins.
Andy knew all of them. He knew Wexner before Wexner and Epstein. So that's why he's the Holy Grail. I'm telling you. I'm going to send you his photo and his information. If you can get that guy to talk, oh my God. But anyway, he's Jewish too. I was the only non-Jewish employee. That was the other thing. They wouldn't have people around that weren't Jewish. It was really weird. Like the only people, now of course all the people they raped were never Jewish. That was another rule, I think. I mean, maybe it wasn't a rule, but it seemed to be. But the children were never Jewish. Just the employees and a lot of Leslie Groff and those people that they had around were usually they trusted each other, but they don't trust people outside their network. So it's not just that they're Jewish, it's that they're connected. I mean, it's so obvious. I know she's in England with the Rothschilds, and I have never been wrong about one aspect of this case, Whitney. I have never been wrong about it. And she's not in Israel. She is in England, and I know she's being protected by that evil monster family. They did definitely want to kill me for a long time, and now I'm not that important to them, but I'm not a very good thing for them to be speaking out. Oh my gosh, that woman is the most dangerous asset for Israel that you can even imagine. I mean, she is so dangerous. By 1995, she was full-time, what she called the lady of the house. And she was full-time getting children for him. Full-time. I mean full-time. And the other person who was always going around with her, this is really weird, Donald Trump's ex-wife, Ivana, was always in the car with her. I mean, constantly. Not one news organization will mention that. I want Ivana Trump to explain herself. That big old cow. Explain yourself. Why were you going out acquiring children with this woman? Because they'd come back and there'd be a pile of kids. And that woman is awful. That Ivana Trump. She was they would go, what would happen is she'd say, I'm going out with Ivana, and she would say, Maria, come along. And I would ride in the limo, and the driver knew what they were doing. We would go in the limo, and she'd be chatting with Ivana, and then she'd go, oh, wait, hold on, I see someone. And she'd run out and, talk to a child and exchange information with them, and then come back, and then that child would be, the next day at the house. Victoria's Secret. I asked her about 10 times, because I have OCD, and if I don't understand something, I'll just keep asking it. And so I would say to her, why are their children modeling for Victoria's Secret? They don't even have breasts, And she's like, oh, no, we need nubile for Victoria's Secret. That was the word she used constantly, nubile. And I admit that I didn't know what it was, so I looked it up, and I was like, that's kind of gross. Why do they have to just have started their period to model? There are only 30 women that have come forward. 30. I saw I'm not kidding, I'm very disturbed by this part. I saw at least 5 girls come in that house a day. It's in the thousands. Where are they? Are they dead? Brad said that he knows of 500 just in Florida. We can't find them. Where are they? These children were between, thousands. I was there a year, and I saw thousands of little girls. It was so exhausting, Whitney. They were in his offices. There were just constantly little girls there. Constantly. Wexner is Israeli intelligence, 100%. He's the head of the snake. She was like, you don't understand our loyalty to Israel, Maria. You don't understand our loyalty. Oh my gosh, that woman is the most dangerous asset for Israel that you can even imagine.
Because if you look at the history, it becomes really clear that Epstein was part of this larger network of sexual blackmail operations that have existed in the U.S. since 1920s that trace back to this national crime syndicate. Even though he was working for Israeli intelligence, the mega group is that same syndicate that's been using sexual blackmail to control politicians since the 1930s, really. And this is, the consequences of the impunity for those people. If they've been doing it since the 30s, they're doing it now. It's not something that stops with Epstein, basically. So it's really important to understand how we got to Epstein in order to understand the significance of that scandal, right? Because there are ties between this Epstein the Epstein network. There's ties to the Franklin scandal. There's ties to the sexual blackmail operation of the White House call boys that was run by Craig Spence in the 1980s. I mean, the ties are just very extensive, and a lot of that history has been forgotten. And I think people, need to realize how deep this goes in order for us to be able to identify where this type of behavior is really coming from. And it's coming from the fact that our intelligence agencies have been in bed with organized crime for decades and decades and decades. And us, even though intelligence agencies say that they're here to help protect us and it's about national security, they themselves operate as organized crime syndicates. The CIA is an organized criminal organization. They do drug trafficking, human trafficking, gun running, you name it. Just look at Iran-Contra. There's numerous other scandals of the CIA doing stuff like that, right? Their currency is secrecy, and it's blackmail. And it's not just the CIA that's like this. It's Mossad that's like this. It's pretty much every intelligence agency on the planet. In the U.S., the CIA and the intelligence apparatus in a big way is really the real government. If you look at, Kennedy and all the presidents since then, whether it's Democrat or Republican, not much changes. And that's because the real power in the U.S. does not lie with who is president. It lies with these organized criminals that rule over us. And this is crucial to understand so that people stop buying into the left-right paradigm. It is fake. Both parties are controlled by these same people that were really behind Epstein and all of this mess. And this is who sets policy. And until people start to realize this on a massive scale, we will be just walking further and further into this nightmare that these criminals are creating for us.
They've been involved in our stealing our technology for many, many years. Another way that Israel has affected U.S. foreign policy is through blackmail operations. And I would point to Jeffrey Epstein, who was allowed for 30 years to recruit young girls in America from vulnerable, broken homes as young as 13 years old. And Mr. Epstein, who I believe was a fake billionaire, I do not believe he was a billionaire, I believe he was an actor, an imposter on behalf of the Israeli Mossad. Mr. Epstein then lured powerful, influential American men into his various mansions so that they could rape the girls. The sexual acts were videotaped, and the videos were sent to Israel for blackmail operations against Americans.
And this was reported in the Daily Beast as well. So is the Epstein case going to cause a problem? This is Acosta talking, and this is someone talking about a conversation that was had there in regards to prosecuting Jeffrey Epstein. Acosta had been asked that would the Epstein case cause a problem for the confirmation hearings. Acosta had explained that back in the day he had had just one meeting on the Epstein case. He'd cut a non-prosecution deal with one of Epstein's attorneys because he'd been told to back off, that Epstein was above his pay grade. I was told, quote, that Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone, he told his interviewers in the Trump transition, who eventually thought that there was a sufficient answer and went ahead and hired Acosta. So what they're talking about here is, would there be problems if Acosta was hired in regarding the confirmation hearings? And Acosta said, hey, I only backed off on the case. This is their narrative. I don't know if any of this is true. They only backed off on the Epstein case, giving that plea deal because he was told to back off because Epstein belonged to intelligence. Obviously, as I went into videos, in order to control people, in order to consolidate power, they need a vice. They need some kind of crowbar in order to get people to do what they want. And that's what I believe Jeffrey Epstein is. That is my personal theory, as well as a number of researchers anyway, that it is a blackmail operation. So at the time, it was very hard to tell what these statues were. The speculations from researchers, including myself, is that this was an elevator shaft, okay, and that there were tunnels and things below Epstein Island. But one specific tunnel is of great interest, and we have a high resolution of it from this drone footage. This is the particular tunnel in question, this one here. So in this case, you can see an opening there with a four-wheel drive right there in the middle, and what looks like a light in the background. Some kind of lighting within that, I'm not sure what's going on there. But these pictures came to light, and a lot of people were talking about how the tunnels were being covered up. This at the top level is probably the main entrance down to something larger. Think bunker, think large structure, lots of bedrooms perhaps, lots of film cameras, no doubt about that, and making people feel that they are in a new world really when they go underground. It's just symbolic as well as some other stuff. Now here we can see something interesting. The elevator shaft goes down, obviously, okay? It goes down to whatever structure is beneath here, and you can see there is a lip over the doorway.
These recent charges include allegations he sexually abused underage girls from 2002 to 2005 inside his Manhattan and Palm Beach homes. When he faced similar allegations a decade ago, federal prosecutors in Florida struck a secret plea deal with Epstein. He avoided a possible life sentence in prison and spent 13 months in Palm Beach jail, where he was allowed to leave for work 6 days a week.
The last time we saw Jeffrey Epstein in West Palm Beach was September 6th of last year. He was getting off his private jet at PBIA to huddle with lawyers, fighting charges he used his mansion in Palm Beach for sexual escapades with girls under 18. Reliable sources tell us he'll report for a 1.5-year term in prison in Florida in June, then face a year probation. The fact that Epstein was allowed to travel to Israel reflects his vast business interests around the world, according to someone close to the case. But allowing someone soon to be imprisoned on felony charges to leave the country is highly irregular. That according to investigative journalist John Connolly, who has covered the Epstein scandal from day one.
In most instances where people are facing criminal time and because a plea agreement has been made or they're under arrest for serious charges,
charges, they are forced to surrender their passport. And apparently Mr. Epstein has not been forced to do that.
The fact that the court ordered Epstein not to have contact with underage girls may indicate that Epstein will be labeled a sex offender. That is something his vast stable of high-powered attorneys have been fighting. Sources tell us that Epstein will likely report to a state prison with modern internet facilities so that he can do business from behind bars. It's been more than 3 years now since Palm Beach police started investigating Jeffrey Epstein. Reporter Connolly says money has bought him time.
I've always been a bit shocked by the way the state prosecutor has handled this case from the get-go. Historically, the police have asked for arrest warrants, and we give them. In this case, because of apparently some very high-powered attorneys, they've treated Mr. Epstein much differently.
A CBS News investigation has uncovered a loophole that allows accused and convicted American pedophiles to escape justice by moving to Israel. So Ian Lee has been following this for more than a year, and he traveled to Israel for this investigation. He worked with a group that tracks people accused of sex crimes, which estimates dozens of Americans have used this loophole.
We are on a stakeout looking for this man, Jimmy Julius Caro, 48 years old and wanted on charges of sexually assaulting a 9-year-old girl in Oregon back in 2000 and a 5-year-old girl in Israel in 2001. He's considered dangerous. Shauna Aronson got a tip that Caro's expected at this clinic near Tel Aviv.
Who's going to call?
She's with JCW, Jewish Community Watch, an organization that hunts down accused pedophiles who flee to Israel from the U.S., exploiting a process called Law of Return, whereby any Jewish person can move to Israel and automatically gain citizenship. The ease with which pedophiles seem able to use this law as an escape route haunts victims like Mendy Hawk, who says he was abused from age 8 by a teacher at an Orthodox Jewish school in Los Angeles. So your classroom is right here. How does it feel being back?
I was very anxious and, stressed coming back here. A lot of memories coming through my mind.
Memories of his alleged abuser, Mordechai Yomtov, who taught him Hebrew studies when he was just 8 years old.
So in the beginning, he would just rub me like outside of my pants, and then I would say about 3 or 4 months later, he started going like in.
Reaching down your pants?
Yeah, reaching down.
Why did you feel like you couldn't tell anyone?
I was scared. I was ashamed. I just didn't know what people would think of me with the whole situation.
Yomtov pled guilty in 2002 to sexually abusing and committing lewd acts against 3 other boys. He served jail time, but when he was released, he violated his probation and, according to JCW, fled to Israel with help from individuals within the Orthodox Jewish community. JCW tracked Yomtov down and confronted him with a hidden camera in Jerusalem, where he admitted to illegally fleeing the United States with help and using a fake passport to enter Israel.
I was supposed to stay for 5 years in the same city. I was supposed to teach on the outside of I was supposed to go to the police station. I left within a week later.
The other person in this video is Meir Seawald, the founder of Jewish Community Watch. He tells CBS News Yomtov's case isn't uncommon in the Orthodox community.
The same thing that's going on in the Catholic Church right now around the world, the exact same thing happens in our community. The rabbis say it's, you know what, he promised he's going to go for therapy, he's never going to do it again. Boom, he's in another community. A few years later, he's at the same thing, and we hear more allegations that the person continued to abuse children.
And often, those abusers end up in Israel. Rabbi Yehuda Oppenheimer says he unwittingly helped Caro escape.
There was nothing that raised any red flags up to the point where he was moving to Israel.
Well, I wish I could say that, but unfortunately I can't say that. So he had violated his parole, and now they were looking for him. He said that there was something in the past that happened when he was young, but nothing ever happened since. I've changed, and I'm a different person now, but you gotta help me. I felt that I could trust him. So I wrote him a letter, and he bought a ticket, and he left.
Caro is accused of abusing more children when he got to Israel.
What was that like for you when you found that out?
Punch to the gut. It was very painful.
Back at the stakeout, an ambulance pulls up and a man steps out. It's Caro.
You know that you're wanted by Interpol? Yeah.
There's relief as police escort him to their car. This marks the end to a months-long manhunt.
He was just arrested.
Wow, oh my gosh.
Amuna, not her real name, is the person on the other end of the line. She was a little girl when Caro entered her life.
I was 4 or 5 years old. My mother was on bed rest. My father's a rabbi, so he wasn't really home. He used to come to our house. We used to play games, and then it became sexual. I'm going to give you a cookie because you do it so nicely. It's all about the cookie. It's all about lying, and it's all about being so evil to a little child. He also threatened me he would kill my parents. He would choke me. He would hold me. He would kidnap me.
What are your thoughts on him being able to come to Israel and flee the United States?
It brings up a lot of anger and a lot of frustration towards the Israeli system.
Shauna says the failure begins in the U.S.
Why would someone want to help one of these pedophiles escape?
Oftentimes there's some sort of community incentive. Either somebody owes them a favor, or someone in the community, let's say an institution, has covered up for them in the past, and they know that if this goes to court, there's a lot of civil liability coming down the line, and it's going to cost a lot of money to a lot of people, and nobody wants to deal with that.
Shauna accuses the Israeli police of not prioritizing accused pedophiles on the run.
Why do you have to be the ones that do this?
Because nobody else is. I don't have any better answer than that.
Jewish Community Watch seems to be doing most of that grunt work, that on-the-ground investigating. Why do they say, the group, why do they say more pedophiles aren't being apprehended?
JCW says that they need to be doing more background checks on these people. Sometimes a simple Google search will bring up, especially if it's an Interpol arrest warrant, will bring that up, and so that they can then know this person is dangerous, they should not be let in, or if there is an arrest warrant out for them, that they need to go and pick them up. And JCW says that there just isn't the priority to go and pick these people up.
That's unbelievable. Does JCW also sort of believe that, aside from law enforcement, there are sort of other elements of the community that need to work on this?
Yeah, and that's another big part of this, is that a lot of the times these people have help. And help within the community, people that help them flee to Israel. Sometimes, as we saw with Yomtov, he had help, according to JCW, to flee the country through Mexico and then get a passport, a fake passport there to immigrate to Israel. So these
are elaborate schemes.
They are, and they need a lot of people to pull off. And they say that there needs to be a conversation within the community about not protecting people.
Does Israel advocacy play any role in your life, supporting it at all?
I'm an Israeli in my heart and mind. Okay, I love that country. I love what it stands for. I'm proud to be Jewish. When people see me 18, they can subtitle it "Jews with Guns."
Documents that include the names of more than 100 people connected to Jeffrey Epstein, including business associates and accusers, among others, were made public on Wednesday, following a federal judge's December ruling that that information must be unsealed. More than 900 pages of mostly unredacted documents were released. And so some of the names here, you're not going to be surprised. We've got Britain's Prince Andrew. We've got Bill Clinton.
Bubba.
We've got Donald Trump. We've got Alan Dershowitz, Prince Andrew. Jane Doe number 3 was forced allegedly to have sexual relationships with this prince when she was a minor in 3 separate geographical locations: London at Ghislaine Maxwell's apartment, New York, and on Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, in an orgy with numerous other underage girls. Epstein instructed Jane Doe number 3 that she was to give the prince whatever he demanded and required Jane Doe number 3 to report back to him on the details of that sexual abuse. Maxwell facilitated, they say, Prince Andrew's acts of sexual abuse by acting as a madam for Epstein, thereby assisting in internationally trafficking Jane Doe number 3 and numerous other girls. So Dershowitz has long been accused of various horrific things with regard to Epstein. They say here that he forced Jane Doe number 3 to have sexual relations with Alan Dershowitz, close friend of Epstein's well-known criminal defense attorney. By the way, Dershowitz helped Epstein get that sweetheart deal that enabled him to get off basically scot-free of previous sex crimes conviction. Epstein required Jane Doe number 3 to have sexual relations with Dershowitz on numerous occasions while she was a minor, not only in Florida, but also on private planes in New York, New Mexico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands.
I can tell you she is still a prostitute. She is selling false stories now for money about me.
Do you have any concern calling her a prostitute when she was victimized at such a young age by this wealthy man?
She was not victimized. She made her own decisions in life.
But at the age of 15, some would say that's a little young and that she was taken advantage of.
When you were negotiating that deal, did you say the word whore so many times you forgot the meaning?
No, I didn't use that term, and I would never use that term to describe a young woman. I just laid out the facts. I chose to become a defense attorney because I like to defend the underdog, and I don't like supporting the government. I like challenging the government.
Man, I hope one day I can look at over 100 accusers and someone worth hundreds of millions of dollars and see that the rich pedophile is the underdog.
Fight the power!
Now, Jeffrey Epstein owned an island in the Caribbean called Little St. James. Have you ever been there? And if so, don't you hate it when Prince Andrew's ass knocks over your drink?
Well, my wife, my daughter, and I, she was about, 7 or something. When Jeffrey Epstein first bought the island, he flew a private plane. We were vacationing in Guadeloupe or Martinique, I forget. And he flew us to the island for one day to see the new island. Nobody was on the island. And we met there with a professor at Harvard Law School and his wife and my daughter. We spent one day there. There were no young people there. There were no girls. There were no women.
That's a big relief you weren't there during Epstein's 20-year alleged pedophile phase.
No, I never was in any area where Epstein was, where there were ever any young people or any misconduct that I ever saw. The same is true, again, president of Harvard, President of the United States.
Well, that's a convincing defense. Nothing could have happened, Ma. Bill Clinton was there.
Alleged victims say that they gave massages at Epstein's residences that turned into abuse. You've said that you've only received one massage at Epstein's residence.
My wife had a massage. I had a massage. They were therapeutic massages. I kept my shorts on, yes. I'm not a big massage person. As I said, my wife had a massage. I had a massage. That was routine. When you went to Epstein's places, he offered massages. And obviously, when he had them, they were not just massages, but when he offered them to people like me and my wife, they were therapeutic.
I mean, it sounds normal enough.
After all that.